we go way back, like, and I want the audience to know this. We know each other from our years in Boston as younger college students, and we shared friends there. And when I knew you there, you would never know about someone's history, and this is something I've learned. You meet people, they're happy. You were perfectly normal, happy college student. I've known you over the years, and you grew a family and all these things, and you seem like the epitome of someone that lived healthy, happy, never had any issues or problems,
Mm,
as most people do through their social media world these days. But your journey was influenced a lot by your family upbringing, which wasn't always perfect. So why don't we start there about what were some of the traumas that you had dealt with growing up that impacted you along the way, but weren't even probably noticeable from the outside world?
sure. Yeah, gosh, it's so true, right? I mean, how many people do we know that we think they're just amazing and
Right.
they are amazing, but they have a lot of inner chaos, let's say. So my upbringing was pretty interesting. I mean, I had a great upbringing, I think, for the most part, but there was a lot of, I would say, little T's, chronic little T's, little trauma.
Mm,
So, parents divorced from a very young age. Before I was one, I went back and forth to my mother's and my father's every other week
mhm.
until I was 13. And then I was legally at the age to move in with my father in the country, Chester, New Hampshire, where I was able to go to a much better school that would springboard me into college because I was a collegiate athlete. So that was kind of the fast and furious, but like I guess the upbringing was fascinating because when I look back and I did like this like first personal growth workshop where it was an emotional boot camp and I put myself in for like a week. And it was a bunch of other people. But I had to paint the picture of my childhood and I had to use, like everyone was in the room and I had to use different people as props. And I was like, you're my dad, you're my stepmom, you're my mom, and you're my mom's boyfriend. And like sat there for an hour and a half, almost laughing.
Hmm.
And they were like, funny, real funny. And I was like, it is kind of funny. After an hour and a half, I finally cracked and I just started bawling my eyes out because I finally like the layers shed and the armor came off. And I was like, ooh, this isn't actually really funny. So I'm like going back there right now, clearly. It was very pivotal. So
Right.
what that was for me was I was an only child, and every single one of these figures in my life drank alcohol.
Mm,
And they were very, of course, present when they wanted to be and very amazing for for a lot of reasons. But there was also a lot of, for me, isolation. So as an only child going back and forth and like trying to deal with the custody battles and the chaos and me just kind of being this pawn, you can imagine how maybe unsettling that could be. So I think that at the time I just, put my armor on, grabbed my tools that I knew at the time, and I did the best I could. Sports was the savior. I was in gymnastics from 3 to 13, then played softball, and all the college or all the high school sports, and then chose softball in college. So yeah, I mean, I just think that it's interesting once we grow up and have children. Those were my beautiful miracles that instead of me raising them, they're truly raising me because I'm seeing so many of my own trauma, right? And so I can take that back to, oh my gosh, now that I know when I'm reacting, that's not has nothing to do with them and has everything to do with my childhood. So if there's something there that's still, boiling over, I'm like, ooh, what is that? Like, what is this trying to teach me? What am I supposed to be like learning from this? And so it's a much different relationship with myself as it is with others. But it took me clearly a little bit to get here. So
yeah, and like you said, we all have these traumas, and whether they're little T's or not, it's funny because I was listening to Joe Rogan podcast talk about this with
love
like
him.
cons yeah, and it's always a comical take, but we find traumas also within our very good lives, we could say. right?
Mm,
Whereas maybe the generational trauma of our grandparents through World War I or World War II was a
correct.
very, deep trauma and very, something to that absolutely impacted them.
Yeah.
We find traumas in maybe, an Amazon delivery coming a day late. Yeah, and it's true. It's
Yeah.
it's like everything
Yeah.
is relational to what it
Yeah.
is. And
My
I'm
kids.
I'm not going to put people down because that trauma, even though it's laughable, it is. It can
Mhm.
be in the body felt that way and actually impact our mental health in the same way as the war impacted our
Mm,
grandparents. And
yeah,
it's
agreed.
everything is so, pivotal and interesting when you break it down to who carries that trauma.